First of all, thank you very much for inviting me here today. Well, I'd just like to mention one thing before we start. This is the first time you've come.
Yes.
And nobody showed you what to do. So you were just hanging around and people were looking at you and...
No, I came for yoga last Sunday.
Right.
No, what day is it? Yeah, yesterday.
Hmm.
And it's my first time that I'm in this center.
Righto.
I arrived not long ago.
But you sat here and nobody thought, who's that strange-looking woman? I better show her what we're going to do and what page it was on. But nobody did. We should punish them, I think, don't you reckon?
I don't believe in punishment.
I do. This is a bit of a problem in some Buddhist groups. I know in our group in Singapore, when I first arrived there, it's a little bit like walking into a refrigerator. You're a new person, you come, nobody welcomes you, nobody talks to you. I remember sitting there chanting once and looking at one person, pretty much like you. They were going like this. And somebody sitting right next to them who knew what to do and never bothered to show that newcomer. Didn't even notice. Now, if you go to a Christian place, my goodness me, welcome. Oh, we're so glad you go. Which part do you go? Oh, come, I'll introduce you to somebody. He lives there too, and so on. Buddhism, walking into a refrigerator. We should do something about that. So next time you're here, if you come regularly, and you notice somebody who you haven't noticed before, say, hello, it's your first time here? Oh, come, I'll show you what to do. I'll show you where the toilet is, and later, and we'll be having a cup of tea later. Make them feel at home. A Buddhist society is supposed to be about friendliness and openness and that. Okay? So next time I come, if that happens, definitely it'll be punishment, okay? Okay. So, here we are. I'm told that I give very good talks. That's what people tell me. I think that's basically true. But generally, rather than giving a lecture, I like to let people ask me about things that they're particularly interested in. And I became a monk in 1976, so that's going on to about 47 years now. So I know Buddhism pretty well. I've written about 20 books on the subject. And I've sort of retired now. Buddhist monks don't really retire. But for 42 years I was teaching Buddhism, and you know, sometimes you need a break from dealing with other people. So now I sit in a small kuti somewhere in Australia, and I have my books, I have the internet, sometimes I do Zoom talks. But for the last 5 years, I haven't, this is the first talk I've given for the last 5 years. So it's sort of nice to be back in the saddle again. It's nice to be asked questions, and it keeps your mind fresh and alert. So I'm really very glad to be here, and I'd like to hand the floor over to you, meaning that if you have anything you'd like to ask me about Buddhism, I'll do my best to answer. Now, sometimes it happens that somebody asks me a question that I have never been I've never been asked before, and I can't think of an answer. That doesn't often happen, but it does occasionally happen. And a few years ago, I'll tell you the last time this happened. So I was in Singapore, and somebody rang me up, and they gave me their name, and they started talking to me. Now, I'm an Ang Mo. I'm not an Ang Mo Kui, but I'm a... and I'm definitely not an Ang Mo cow, okay? Okay? But we Ang Mos, when we hear a Chinese name, we don't know whether it's a male name or a female name, you know. So it was, and this person had a particular voice. It wasn't clear to me whether I was talking to a man or a woman. And until you know, you're a little bit off balance. You know. Anyway, I listened and I said, yeah, how can I help you? And she said, I've got a problem. And I said, what's the problem? I'm about to have a very serious operation and I'm very worried. And I said, well, that's understandable, but Singapore has got some of the best health services in the world, should be okay. There's always a certain risk in surgery, but I'm sure you'll be okay. And we talked a little bit more of that. And then I said, what have you asked one Sufua? And he said, yeah, I asked some. And what did he say? You'll go to hell for 1,000,000 years and you'll be tortured. And I said, that was really helpful, wasn't it? Yeah, okay. Mm-hmm. And I said, other things? And he told me else. And that made him feel very happy. And I said, oh, the business about being cooked in hell for 10 million years, don't worry about that. I don't believe that. I think that's wrong. And I think that Sufu was very unkind to say that. Even if he believed it, it was a very unkind and unhelpful thing to say. And then I said to him, well, after you've had your operation and you're recovered and you feel better than that, ring me up. I'd like you to ring me up and let me know how you're going along. And he said that he would do that. And when people ask me for my advice, and I give my advice, I like to know whether my advice benefited them in some way, you see? So I often ask them, later on when you feel better, let me know. Or let me know what happened. And indeed this this woman rang me up and told me that she was feeling much better and more at home in herself and etc., etc., etc. So I wished her well, and that was that. But generally, there are not too many times when I've been asked a question about Dhamma and I can't give an answer. But it can happen. Try and see. So, that's it. If you'd like to discuss a particular issue related to Buddhism, I'll do my best to answer any questions you might have. So I hand the floor over to you. If you want to ask a question, very quick off the mark. Good, yes.
Hi, good morning.
Yes, good morning.
My first time here, so I'm really excited to see all these new people and new friends. I come from a Catholic background.
Technical background.
Catholic background. Catholic background. Yeah,
right.
and but I've not practiced for a long time. Yeah, just went to school and all that. Did the Sunday school thing. But anyway, it's related to my son.
Oh.
My son's here for his first time. First Sunday school. Okay.
Okay. So your son is now coming to the Sunday school here, is that it?
First class today.
First time, right?
Yes. I need a bit of clarity. That's the reason for this question. He's going to go to a all Christian school, all right? And he starts on Monday. They have Christian Bible studies every day, and when he goes into secondary school, it's going to be the same. So I'm just trying to understand in terms of how do I position Buddhism, knowing that he's going to be going into a all Christian environment for the good part of his
education.
Education, yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So, what you're not keen on Catholicism anymore? Just yes or no?
No.
Okay, right. And what about him? What's his feeling about this?
He's
undecided.
Undecided at this point in time, yes.
So, seems to me that nowadays there are basically two types of Christians. You get fairly liberal, open-minded, right? And you get some really fanatical, narrow-minded and bigoted ones, sorry to say. And generally I found the Catholics to be the first type. They tend to be fairly open and what have you and that. I doubt whether he's going to learn anything bad there. In fact, I imagine that most of the things that he will learn as far as behaviour and ethics and values are probably quite good, because Christian ethics are fairly similar to Buddhism. But he will also learn some theology, that is, some ideas about the nature of God and Jesus and what have you. I would leave it up to him to decide. But if you, what's your feeling about Buddhism?
I don't know enough about it.
Oh, that's a very good answer, thank you. So you haven't made a decision because you don't know very much about it. Well, I would say let your son know that. Let your son know, look, I was brought up a Catholic and it just doesn't do anything for me anymore, but you know, that may be different from you, and in the next months or years you're going to be learning their religion. I would encourage you to look at some other religions too, and get him some books and give them to him to read and let him make up his own mind. You might also tell him that, oh, gee, it's a good thing you came to the Buddhist Gem Fellowship today because there's a monk there, he's an Australian, he was a Christian for quite a few years and he decided it wasn't for him either. So don't forget that in your school they'll be telling you, they'll be giving you what they believe is the best image of their religion, but there are other religions and there are some other very, very good ones. I think Buddhism is a pretty good one too. Here's a book on the subject, read it, see what you say. And if he has any questions, maybe bring him here sometime and let somebody here give him an explanation. How's that?
Perfect, thank you.
Good. You know, sometimes, I don't do it anymore, but I used to be invited to these interreligious conferences, you know. I call them the funny hat conference. There's one guy's got no hat, and another guy's got this sort of hat, and another one's got that sort of hat, and the Sikh guy has got this sort of hat. So I always call them the funny hat conferences. And I don't go anymore because I think everybody's slapping each other on the back and saying, your religion is just the same as mine. And I mean, I've studied different religions. They all seem to be, to me, very, very different. But I like to tease them a little bit. So when I'm talking to Christians, the nasty Christians, the narrow-minded Christians, don't come to those sort of conferences, you know. It's only the nice, more open-minded ones. So I always say to them, oh, I think Christianity is the nicest religion in the world. You know, you've got a loving Saviour, and you've got a God who protects you, and you've got the forgiveness of sins, and you've got this, and you've got the importance of love. And I mean, I think it's just the most wonderful religion in the world. And they said, oh, mm-hmm. I said, in fact, I can only think of one thing wrong with it. They say, what's that? I say, it isn't true. Oh. According to me, according to my understanding. Okay, anything else anybody would like to ask? Yes.
Yeah, good morning, Bhante.
Good morning.
Yeah, I think as we were chanting just now, especially on the Sangha.
Especially on the Sangha, yes.
Yeah. I remember one of my Buddhist friends told me that he knew that I'm still new to Buddhism. He said, if you are new to Buddhism, the salutation to the Sangha is a good way to learn Buddhism. Mm-hmm. He say, you remember the Supatipano and so on, and then Ujupatipano. He said that these four methods you can use to practice Buddhism. Mm-hmm. But as I look at those four things, it seems pretty close to me. Can you elaborate on what are the differences between these four? Supatipano, Bhagavato.
What about them? You want to know what they mean?
Yeah, what do they mean? I think they seem quite similar to each other.
I see. They appear to be pretty much the same. Each of them seems to be the same to you. Is that it? Okay, let me just say, Anumodana, blah, blah, blah. Itipiso, Swakato, Supatipano. Okay, so the first thing is, it's talking about the Sangha. Which Sangha? Huh? I'm not sure that that's actually correct. That's what people tell me. But when you read the suttas, it's talking about mainly the Arya Sangha. That is, those who have attained the first stage leading up to enlightenment. So according to the Buddhist theory, you and I, in our future life, And then in our next life later, we may continue with Buddhism, we may not, we may become better, we may morally decline, we can't say. But there is a certain realization a person has when they get to that stage, there's no turning back. It's, from now on, it's going to be uphill all the way. So that's called stream entry. Okay, and it's called stream entry is because very often the Buddha saw existence like a river. This bank of the river is unsafe, unpredictable and dangerous. That side of the river is safe, and samsara is the river in between. You have to cross over. So to cross over a river, the first thing you've got to do is jump in, isn't it? So that's why it's called stream entry. You have to enter the stream. So once somebody enters the stream, supposedly, that's the theory, that there's no turning back after that. So for the most part in the suttas, when it's talking about the Sangha, it's not referring to monks and nuns. It's or lay men or lay women. It's referring to those who have entered the stream, or more. And that could be a layman, it could be a lay woman, it could be a monk or a nun. And if you look at some of the things you said, okay, well it says upright, wise, dutiful, etc. Well, I know quite a few monks who are not particularly upright. I know a few who are downright stupid, etc. So this is clearly not referring to ordinary samsaric men, women, monks, nuns, laymen or lay women. It's referring to people who have reached a certain stage of realization. Okay? Anyway, let's have a look at them. What's that?
What page are you looking at?
What page am I looking at? 28 and 29. 28 is the English, 29 is the Pali. Okay, swakato. Well attained. There you go, you see. They've attained a particular stage. They've reached a certain level of understanding. Swakato. Uju. Oh, that's a very nice word. Do you know how do they translate it here? Here they translated it as upright. Yeah, that's okay. It actually means straight. Straightforward. Direct. But upright is okay too, because the uj is related to the Pali word upa, meaning up, up. But I would normally translate that as straightforward. I think you get that in the Metta Sutta also. Karaniyamattu kusalena yang tang santang padang abhisamecha sakko uju. The straightforward. They don't say one thing and do another. They don't say one thing to your face and say something else behind your back. They're straightforward. What you see is what you get. Okay? Uju. Okay? And then what's the next one? Nyaya. Wise. So that's straightforward is something about your morality. Wise is something about your intellectual understanding. Okay? Nyaya. Samichi. Practicing well. So this is about your general behavior. Okay, you do the right thing. You treat people with honesty and decency and what have you. So they seem to be relatively, they're related, but they're all basically different. Is that okay to you? Okay, good. Anything else? You had a question?
Hello, Bhante. My question is connected to the first
question.
Yeah, the first question on belief system.
On belief system.
Belief system. We are so bombarded with all the different types of belief system. So sometimes it can be overwhelming.
It can be.
Yeah. just like nutrition, right? This is good for you, this is not good for you. And at the end, we all end up is we eat whatever, right? And is belief system necessary for a human being, for our existence? Or are we swamped with so much belief, so many belief systems that we are confused, don't know which is right and which is wrong?
Well, if you went to the Middle East, a Muslim country, there'd be no confusion. You'd be told what's true, you would have no access to any other opinion, and you'd be told you believe it or else. So I don't think there's too much confusion there. And if somebody has any confusion and doubt, they certainly don't talk about it. Okay?
Do we really need a belief system
Okay.
to exist on this planet Earth?
I was just going to answer that question. No, I don't think so. I mean, I think of my younger brother. He doesn't have any interest in religion whatsoever. He's younger than me, okay? I can never remember him ever asking me anything about Buddhism, and as a result, I've never told him anything. And I think if I started explaining Buddhism to me, his eyes would sort of go glassy, and he's simply not interested. And I suspect that there are millions of people like that. They have got interests. This guy's interested in football, that guy's interested in gardening, that guy's interested in promoting his business, and maybe he goes to church on Sundays sometimes, or he goes to the temple sometimes, but that's simply not significant in his life. I don't think that significant numbers of people do care too much. I think most people's attitude to religion is, Mum and Dad used to do this, I just follow. Don't you reckon?
At the beginning, yes.
Hmm.
But later on, when
Okay. Okay. So sometimes some people, for example, like Prince Siddhartha, I imagine he just went along with everybody else believed, but then supposedly he saw an old man, a sick man, a dead man, and this came as a bit of a shock to him. So then he started thinking, what does that mean? Or in Malaysia and Singapore, I know people, they just go to the temple and worship Tape Kong and Qigong and burn a bit of paper money and that, and they've never really thought about it. And then one day a Christian comes knocking on the door and telling them that that's devil worship and this, and they've never thought about that before until this guy came up and challenged them. So then they may start, okay? So, or somebody may have a crisis in their life. Gone through life, really never thought about too much, and then doctor tells them they've got cancer and 6 months to live. Now they start thinking about such questions. So that certainly does happen, okay? But the mere fact that, according to my understanding, large numbers of people really don't think too much about these things suggests that it's not really necessary for life. It seems to me that lots of people can get through life quite okay without any strong or deep religious convictions, but not everybody is like that. So, for example, I was brought up in a Christian home. Neither of my parents were particularly religious, and I can never remember them ever going to church. And in fact, I started going to church on my own accord. And when I went to church, I found out the other kids, they were going there because their parents had pretty much pushed them to go there. I went voluntarily. And I remember one night listening to my parents talking about me. And my father, who was actually I don't think he was against Christianity, but he didn't like Christians. He thought that they were stupid people who were always pushing their religion. He didn't like them very much. And I remember him saying, God, he's going to that bloody church, blah, blah, blah. And my mother saying, it won't hurt him. So that was their attitude. My father sort of would want to discourage me. My mother said pretty much what I just said to you. He won't learn anything bad or dangerous. Let him go. That was their attitude to religion. But from a very early age, for some reason or other, I don't know why, I had an interest in religion. So I used to go to church fairly regularly. But by the time I was about 17 or 18, it was wearing thin. I couldn't but help notice that some people, the stronger their faith, the bigger hypocrites they were, and things like that. And also this idea of God just didn't make sense to me. So that's actually how I ended up with Buddhism. So I basically just stopped going to church, and it wasn't that I turned against it, it just fell away. It didn't appeal to me, okay? But I still had this religious impulse. So once the Mormons came to my door, you have the Mormons here? You know, there's always two nice-looking American guys with a shirt and a tie, okay? And I invited them in. And my mother said, oh, for God's sake, don't invite, you can never get rid of them, you know. But I was interested in what they had to say, and they gave me their Book of Mormon, and subsequently they came twice, and I found out it was pretty much the same as a sort of a form of Christianity. And then one day I found a book on Buddhism, quite by accident. I'd never really even thought of Buddhism. I didn't know very much about religion. And I read that book, and that made perfect sense to me. I only had to read it once. Now, I didn't understand it all, but what I did understand made perfect sense to me. And then over the next few years, any book I found on Buddhism, I started to read it. And I had the experience you're just talking about. I was completely bewildered. Bodhisattva and Buddha, what is a Buddha? So each book I read seemed to be teaching something different. Because at that time I didn't know the difference between Theravada and Mahayana. There weren't many books on Tibetan Buddhism in those days. So the more I read, the more confused Zen, what the hell is Zen? Is it a form of... I really didn't know, but I persisted. And eventually I found that book, I think you have some copies here, Walpola Rahula's book, What the Buddha Taught. It's quite a good introduction to Buddhism. And that focused me on one particular type of Buddhism, in this case Theravada Buddhism. And from then on, I was more circumspect about what I read. If it said Mahayana, I didn't read it. Not because I thought it was wrong, but that interpretation of Buddhism, the Theravada interpretation of Buddhism, seemed to make most sense to me. And I would have to say, by the time I was about 19, I called myself a Buddhist. And I have been ever since. I got more and more into it, and like I said, now I know it pretty well. So people are different. People have different needs, respond in different ways. Anything else? Yes. You're new here, are you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm just like your brother.
What's that?
I'm just like your brother. Free.
You don't look anything like
No. Free thinker.
Yeah.
After the passing of my young niece. Okay, that was more than 11 years ago. So just one question. If we are not spiritual, where would I go after I stop breathing?
So, if you're not spiritual, where will you go?
I don't have a religion where,
right.
You know, I don't go to the temple, I don't go to the church. My family, we have all kinds of religion, even Muslims. So, for me,
you haven't decided yet.
I haven't decided. I believe in all religion that teaches us good things. Okay, so but then sometimes we do ask ourselves, if I don't have a religion, what would my family do when I stop breathing? Where do I go? Halfway to heaven or where?
So your question is, you don't have a religion, What will happen when you die? Is that your question?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Well, different religions will give you different answers to that. So I think the Christian and the Islamic answer is pretty clear. You're going to be in trouble. Okay.
That's what a lot of people say so.
Yeah. I'll give you the Buddhist view. Buddhism is not about, you don't go have a good rebirth because you believed in the Buddha. You have a good rebirth according to your actions. So we can say that, you can say that Christianity and Buddhism are creedal religions. That is, they're based on a creed. C-R-E-E-D. And creed comes from the Latin word, I believe. Okay? So when you go to a Catholic church, for example, you read the creed. I believe in the only Holy Catholic Church. I believe in the forgiveness of sins. I believe that Jesus died and on the third day he rose. I believe that blah, 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 and he will come again and judge the living and the dead. Okay? There are certain principles that you have to believe. That's okay. Now, they also, in Christianity, they also teach that you should be a good person. And some of the things that Jesus said about being good are very lovely. He said some very nice things. But that won't save you, according to Christianity. You're not saved by being a good person. You're saved by believing certain principles. So if you look, Methodist Church, Catholic Church, the Seventh-day Adventists, they all have a creed where they lay out various things that you must believe. Okay? And when you believe those, God favors you, and when you die, he will save you. Okay? There's nothing, Buddhism is not a creedal religion. So if you look at the Noble Eightfold Path, you come here regularly? What's the first step on the Noble Eightfold Path? Okay, what is it? No, that's the first noble truth. What's the first step on the Noble Eightfold Path? What is it? Okay, what's the next step? Come and see me later. Oh, he's cheating. He's looking up on his phone. Okay, so the first one is right view or right understanding. Second one is?
Right thought.
Huh?
Right thought.
Right thought. Next one?
Right speech.
Thank you. Next one?
Right action.
Right action.
Right livelihood.
Good.
Right effort.
Right.
Effort.
Yeah.
Right effort.
Yeah, right effort. Yeah, next.
Right
How
mindfulness.
come it's only one person doing this?
And right concentration.
Okay, right. It's easy to understand, okay? You're set out on a journey. Now, you don't set out on a journey and somebody says, where are you going? Oh, I have no idea, I'm just going. When you set out on a journey, you have to know, you have to have some idea of where you're going and what direction it is. So that's why the first step on the Noble Eightfold Path is samaditi, or so right understanding or right view. Where are you going? Well, I'm going to Nirvana. How far is it? It's a long way. How do you get there? Well, you know, because the Buddha told you. So clearly, in the beginning, you've got to orientate yourself to a particular direction. So that's why the first step is right view. Then the next three steps are about morality, ethics. Now, if you go to India or you go to a Tibetan Buddhist center here, you'll see people bowing to a statue of the Buddha. And they do it like this. Thought, speech, action. Mind, tongue, body. So those first three, those second, third and fourth principles are about ethics. How you think, how you speak, and how you act. Right? So, right view, right thought, right speech, right action. What's the next one? Right? Like, isn't that interesting? I think it is. How you do your job. How you make your living. Okay? So, most people will spend at least half their life working. So if you're doing a job that's not really ethical, really wholesome, or it's a lousy job, or you hate it, that's going to have a negative effect upon you. Because your job has some impact upon you. A young man came to me and said, I'm selling insurance. So as soon as he said that, I ran away. Because I've met these guys before. You need a policy. No, I don't. Yes, you do. Okay. So he said, I'm selling insurance. Is that a right livelihood or not? And I said, well, you can't say that. It depends on how you're doing your job. So, for example, being a teacher is a good job. Being a doctor is a good job. Being a plumber or a carpenter is a good job. But you could do those jobs badly. You could be a teacher who just doesn't give a damn about his patients, his students. You could be a doctor who oversubscribes so that he can get some kickback from the drug company or something. You understand? So there are some jobs, I think it doesn't matter how you do them, they're wrong. And there are other jobs that are good, they're wholesome, depending on how you do them. So it's not just what job you do, what work you do, it's also how you do your job, okay? So the next one is right livelihood. Anyway, this young guy come to me and he said he sells insurance. Is that a good job or a bad job? I said, it depends. How do you do it? And he said, well, I get a commission according to how many policies I sell and what sort of policies I sell. So I've sort of really got to push people. When they give me a reason why they don't want a policy, I've got to try to frighten them. Yeah, what would happen if you died? What would happen to your kids? So he told me, basically, he lies to people in order to fulfill his quota and get his salary. And I said, well, I don't have to tell you about Buddhism. What do you think about that? And he said, yeah, I agree with you. And he said, when I started, I found myself sometimes lying. And now I realize I've become a liar. I thought that was quite profound. There's a difference between lying and being a liar. So lying is telling a lie. Being a liar is you lie all the time. It's become easy for you. It's become second nature. You become good at it. Okay? Anyway, later on he came to me and he told me that he had left that job and he got another job with a slightly lower salary. But he told me he felt better. And I thought that was a very good thing for him to do. It's better to have maybe a little less income and not be a liar. So that's why the Buddha included how you work, what work you do, as one of the steps leading to Nibbana. And what's the next step again? Right effort. Okay. So it's not going to fall in your lap. Here, once again, would be somewhat of a difference with Christianity. In Christianity, you surrender to Jesus and he takes care of the rest. Well, according to Buddhism, it doesn't work that way. You have to make an effort to bring about changes within yourself. Seems to make sense to me. And then the last two steps in the Noble Eightfold Path are right mindfulness and right concentration. So this concern, or these two together, concern what we would normally call psychological training or mental training. They would be equivalent to what we do with our bodies. This morning, John and I went for a walk and we passed at least 3 people. That's good. Keep your body fit. Very few people bother about keeping their mind in a good state. So you could say that those last 2 steps are about that. They're trying to understand your mind, trying to get a good understanding of what's going on in your mind, and then trying to transform your mind, and finally liberating your mind. So that's very different from believing in the Buddha. And if you look at those 8 steps, nowhere does it say right belief. Why? You could believe in the Buddha all you like. If you were a liar, a cheat, a cruel person, jealous, etc., you won't have a very good rebirth. It's not about what you believe, it's about what sort of a person you are, how you behave. Okay? So I would say that that's a big difference. So and I think this makes Buddhism a genuinely universal religion. In most other religions that I know, unless you believe in their particular deity, you've got trouble. According to Buddhism, a good Christian, a good Jew, a good Muslim, a good atheist, if they're basically a decent person, they will have a good rebirth. That's what I say. Is that okay? So even though you don't look like my brother, if you're a decent person, I'd say you probably have no problems. Anything else? Yes.
How should I think? What should I do when My question is about parenting.
About parenting,
Yes.
is it? Yes.
I have a ADHD son,
You have a what, son?
hyperactive son. Hyperactive
Take
son.
your mask off if that's okay. You have a hyperactive son?
Yeah, and it's pretty hard to get him to sit down and.
Okay, yeah, it can be challenging, can't it?
Yeah.
I've always thought that giving him a good hard whack makes a difference. Have you tried that? Okay.
Kind of, but not
Okay.
too not too much of a whack.
yeah.
How should I think, and how should I carry myself when I want to make him do something that he's not keen in doing,
Okay.
like doing his homework?
Have you consulted a child development person or something?
Yeah.
Like that? Okay, so they're the best person to give you advice on that. If they're competent in that area, and as you're aware, it can be very, very stressful. Okay, and the child will have problems later when he goes to school, etc. So it's something that needs to be he needs some sort of help of some sort, and his caregivers, his mum and dad, need some help because it can be very, very stressful. But I'm not competent to give you advice on that because that's not my field. Okay. You need to consult counsellors for that. But I've generally found, because you're not the first person who's told me that they have this problem, is that it seems to me that mums and dads love their kids. They would probably give their life for their kids if it was necessary. So if they would do that, and I'm sure you're that type of person, it makes it easier to put up with, the constant problems. It makes it easier for you to be more patient. That doesn't mean sometime you'll just be exasperated or fall into bed exhausted or something like that. But that's what comes with being a parent. You have had the gift of having a lovely little boy, is it? Okay. It's not going to be easy sailing the whole way, but he's yours. You brought him into the world. I imagine you just love him to bits. A part of that will be gradually learning to deal with his situation. And a good hard whack. Don't forget, that works sometimes too. But you need to consult an expert on the subject. How old is the little guy?
He's 11.
Oh, he's
also
probably going to
attending
get
the first
worse
class,
when
yeah.
when he starts getting puberty. He's probably going to. So, what have the people that you've talked to said about him? I mean, have they got any medication for him or something like that?
No, his case is mild.
His what?
Mild.
Oh, he's
It's
only
a mild
mild.
case.
He's mild, and you're already complaining.
Exactly. I can't imagine if he's having a
Okay,
serious
right.
case.
He's a handful already, is he?
Yes.
Well, that an option. My feeling is it needs to be a last option, but it can be very disruptive for their school life, and it's important that they do well in their school. So you're going to have to do a little bit of research on that, I would say.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good morning, Bhante.
Yes, good morning.
May I ask you 2 questions?
Yep. You can ask 3 if you like.
Okay. Okay, the first one is my daughter asked me the other day, if something is truthful, but it's not beneficial, it's beneficial to her, but it's not beneficial to the other party,
Okay.
but it's the truth. Should
she say it?
express it out? Yes.
Yeah. Well, I don't know the background, but the Buddha was actually asked this question once, and he gave a very interesting answer. I don't know if you know, it's called the Abhaya Rajakumar Sutta, where somebody asked the Buddha, could you say anything that would upset anybody? And he said, my word, I can. Not only would I, but I have. But if I have to do that, I will make sure that my words are useful, truthful, spoken at the right time, kalena, and motivated by compassion. Truthful, useful, spoken at the right time, and motivated by compassion. So in business, in family life, in running a Buddhist group, whatever, sometimes harsh words have to be spoken. Somebody has to be pulled into line. Somebody needs to know the truth. So the problem is not everybody can take that.
And everyone have their different perceptions. So
Right.
that 4th criteria, it may be compassionate on her part,
Well,
it may have some anger
yep.
and delusion. She's 16, by the way, and this happened last year when she was 12. So I had a huge argument with her because I didn't know how to go about it, because if she were to say it out, the timing wasn't right.
Right.
It's the truth.
Okay, that's the first 2, yeah.
And it's useful.
Right.
But then there's the thing, the perception is useful in her eyes.
Yeah.
But it may not be useful
In the-
to the other
right.
person.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. So there's a problem there. So some people, they definitely don't want the truth. If it's something unpleasant about themselves, they will deny it, they'll get angry, etc. What can you do? So it seems to me that in some cases, useful means, is it going to bring about some positive change? So if it's not going to be, all things being equal, it's pointless. You just end up having an argument, a bitter argument, and you might end up making an enemy. And that's even worse. So sometimes really the only thing you can do is withdraw. But under probably many circumstances, if you assess the 4 together, am I doing this because I want to get rid of that guy, or because I want to give him one? Or am I really doing it because of empathy? I really feel that it would be the best for him and others as well. Then I think sometimes you have to do that. Look, I really like you and you've done so much to help the society in that, but you're driving people away. The purpose of our society is to try and encourage people to come. Now, your contribution has been really great, we really appreciate it, but you've got this really nasty habit and it has to change. So, and if they say, okay then, I'm leaving. Well, me? What about you? They use all these strategies and that. So if it's not working, there's no point in keep on pushing. Then you've got to take some other action. But for the most part, it seems to me, useful, truthful. Are you sure that that really is the situation? Or is it just your perception? So for this you need some honesty, some self-understanding. The one I like most is at the right time. So when is it the right time to tell somebody a hard truth? Well, the wrong time, all the time. If you're going on all the time about this mistake this person makes or keeps on making, that's not going to work. The wrong time is he's a real nuisance, but I don't tell him, I tell everybody else. That is definitely the wrong time. Okay? So that turns other people against him, but it doesn't change him. You speak to him. When is the best time to speak to him? When you're not angry. God, he's done it again. Right, at this time I'm going to... No, that is definitely the wrong time. Calm down, speak to him tomorrow. You're more likely to do it in a way that he can accept, or she can accept. You understand what I mean? Whereas if you do it out of anger, you might overdo it. And as in so many things that the Buddha talked about, empathy, kindness, compassion, and genuine concern for the welfare of the others, that's fundamental. Now that may not suit the situation that you're talking about, but that's pretty much what the Buddha said, and I think that's, in most situations, a fairly good guidance.
I did say that third point Bhante said,
Useful, truthful.
You said to be kind to another person, you should think of other people's feelings, right? So for a 12-year-old going through puberty and all, she answered me back, then what? How about me, mommy? So she shouldn't think of what my feeling is. So, and that person is her elder, her teacher. So.
I can't say more on it unless you actually tell me the whole situation. But anyway, that's the most that I could say. One last thing. People need to understand that not every problem has a solution. Is it? Sometimes you've just got to learn to live with some problems, despite perhaps trying your best to resolve it or something. And sometimes some problems simply don't have a solution. I hope you and your daughter can out a solution, but that's the most I can say for the time being, unless you tell me the whole scenario. Okay?
I'll make appointment.
You make a what?
An appointment.
Right. I'm getting out of here. Okay.
Good morning, Bhante.
Good morning.
Yes. Can Bhante explain the concept of me and I? Because in our, a lot of our books, talking about I'm not me, there's no I, there's no me, that kind of. So how does it? How do we carry our?
Can you make sense of that? Yeah. It makes perfect sense if people teach it properly. Okay? So, there's a thing called a study, a science called child development. How a child develops after it's born. So, and psychologists are very interested in this. How a personality is constructed. So, when you've got a baby, there can be a light right over there, and the baby reaches out to it. He hasn't learnt yet that there's a thing called depth and distance. Gradually he'll learn that. Second thing is, in the beginning, you never use the child's name when they really use it. Booby baba. Only later on do you say Tan or Philip or whatever. And like a dog, the dog very soon learns through reward and punishment that Fido means him. So whenever he hears the word Fido, his ears go up. He knows it's... so the child gradually identifies with its name. And then when we've got babies and that, we give one blue clothes and the other one pink clothes. Huh? And then as the child gets a little bit bigger and it takes its brother's toy, we say, no, look, that's your brother's toy. Now give it back to him. This one's yours, that one's his. So he gradually learns barriers, borders, possessions, depth, name, etc. And all this together builds up his personality. And generally they say, but certainly by the time somebody is about 14 or 15, they've got a fairly complete personality. By the time they're about 24 or 25, it's quite hard to change that personality, okay? But the point is, when the child is born, it has no personality. It may have unconscious personality traits from the last life, but they won't become apparent until later. Most of his personality has been built up in his childhood experience. Now this is himself. Now, you got an ID card? Yes. What's on it?
Our names, our...
Right, Nama, what Buddha calls Nama.
Yeah, date of birth.
Righto.
A number and our
ID.
address, you know, correspondence address.
Anything else?
No, some got religion, some don't specify religion.
Got a picture of your face on it?
Yes, our face. Yes.
Nama and Rupa, mind and body.
Right.
So even the state recognizes that part of you is your mind and part of it is your body. Now, why don't they have a picture of your elbow? Or, I don't know, your buttocks? I mean, I think that'd be good, isn't it? Oh, that certainly is a nice bottom, yeah, okay. Yeah, that's you, all right. Now, why don't they have a picture of your bottom or your elbow or your ear, maybe? Everybody's ear is different. Have a look at people's ears. Why do they have a picture of your face?
I don't know, for identification, I don't know.
Of course it's for identification, but why not your elbow? You could identify... The reason is your face has got many features in it, so it is immediately obvious, unlike your elbow, you see, elbows look mainly the same, bottoms look exactly the same, okay, so they're no good. But according to the state, that is you. Now, you can change your name, you can change your ID number, you can change virtually all those things, and nowadays you can even change your face. In fact, I sort of thought you'd had 3 or 4 facelifts already. Huh? You understand? You can radically change your face. All those things can be changed. So this is what we call the empirical self. This is, no matter what anybody says, no matter what the Buddha says, that exists. That's a real experience that I have. I feel myself different from you. Okay? But all of that can change. Now in ancient India, and in, say, religions like Christianity and Islam, they've got the idea of what they call a soul, or an Atman. And the belief is that apart from your body and your mind and your name, there's some sort of invisible thing that existed before you were born, and it will exist forever after you die, and that's the real you. Now the Buddha said, well, show me where it is, and nobody's ever been able to find this soul or this Atman. So when the Buddha said no self, anatman, he's not talking about your body, your mind, your ID number, your etc. He's talking about this soul, okay? Nobody's ever found this soul, and nobody ever will, because no such thing exists. So the Buddha's idea was nothing is, it's in the process of becoming something else. In other words, we're changing all of the time. And that was a very profound insight. I think he was the first and one of the very few people to realize you're not eternal. You're changing all of the time. So I use this analogy. Mum takes out her photograph album, and she's got 3 kids. One's 13, one's 9, and one's 4. And she says to her kids, that's me when I was born. And they look at her, is that you, Mummy? Yeah, that's me. And then she shows him a picture of herself when she was 13. Is that you? Yep, that's me. Now she looks quite different from how she looks now. And then she shows them different pictures, and those kids can't recognize her until she's about 15 or 16. Then they start seeing similar facial traits and what have you. And by the time she's about 35 and 40 and that, they can recognize her very easily. Okay. So we also happen to know that all the cells in our body, about I think it's every 5 years or something. It's 7, thank you. You know what I'm about to say, don't you? Every one of them has been replaced by other ones. In other words, even physically, she is completely different from when she was a baby. Her ideas are different, her beliefs are different, her memories didn't exist then, they exist now, etc. She is not even physically the same, not one cell. And yet, if her kids listen to some monks talking about, is that you, mummy? No, I don't exist, you say. Yes. Of course you exist. Of course you exist, despite the change. And I think that was one of the most subtle and profound things that the Buddha understood. So there is a real you. We will call that the empirical self. That's yourself as you experience yourself. But you're not, there is not an eternal soul that will go to heaven when you die or to hell where you die. That's what the Buddha was saying. Okay? You're not a lake. You are a river. You're changing all of the time. Make sense?
Yes, very good. Thank you, sir. But, sir, Bhante, what about the mind? But we do have a mind, right?
Of course you. I do. I don't know about you.
So this mind is always our own mind,
all the time.
never change.
Yep. What about when you're asleep?
Sleeping, not thinking?
Can you think,
no,
feel,
not thinking.
See, taste, touch and smell when you're asleep? And that sense, now you feel yourself different from me. You experience yourself. What about when you're fast asleep? You don't feel yourself anymore. It disappears. That's creepy when you think about it, okay? So the mind, for ordinary discourse, we can say your mind, it's your mind and it remains until you die. But if you took the memories, the thoughts, the feelings, the perceptions out of it, what would there be? Well, we don't know because we can't do that. So in ordinary parlance, we can say that your mind is changing all of the time, but you have a mind all that time. Okay? One last question before we finish.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Morning, Bhante. I just wonder, what can we do if we are lost, when we are in the crossroad? What can we do if we are lost? Is that...
You're not lost, you're here.
No, I mean...
You address if you like.
Okay, that means when we are lost in life or when we are coming to a crossroad, when we want to have a career change or in any other things in life. Is meditation is one of the way to find out the answer, because they say when your mind is calm, then you get to find the answer within ourselves.
Right. Okay. So I think you answered your own question there. Now, once again, when you look at some religions, people say, oh, once I believed in ABC and now all my problems are solved. Well, good luck. Terrific. I admire you. Buddhism doesn't teach that. Buddhism, no honest Buddhist says, you accept the Buddha and then you'll make money, you'll be rich, or all your problems will be solved, you'll never get sick, and if you get sick, the Buddha will heal you. Anybody who says that doesn't know Buddhism. Buddhism accepts that there will always be problems, difficulties, barriers in life. That's just the way it is. The less you have, the better, and I hope most of you have as few as possible. But simply because you're a Buddhist, it doesn't mean that all your problems are going to go away. But what it does mean is it can give you resources that help you handle those difficulties more creatively. Okay? So most of us will have difficulties in life. Occasionally we'll have crises. The death of somebody very close to us, or the collapse of our business and we've got no resources to fall back on. These things happen. They have causes, but sometimes those causes have nothing to do with us, or we didn't cause them. COVID caused them or something like that. So I used to, when I was in Singapore, I always used to know when the exams were coming around. How did I know? Because suddenly students from the university would come, Bhante, can you teach me meditation? So they thought that if they learn meditation, they'll be able to sort of focus more on their exams. And I always said the same thing. Yeah, I'll teach you meditation. After the exams, come and see me. And I'll teach you meditation so that that may help you next year. But it's no coming to me 5 days before and thinking that meditation is going to help you. No, it's too late now. So you don't know. You like along, fantastic for you. Excellent. Do it now, because you never know what's around the corner. Make the provisions of having a focused, clear mind, being able to sometimes be detached from negative thoughts and feelings and what have you, so that when a barrier or a difficult situation comes up, you're in a better position to deal with it. And I know from personal experiences, I consider myself very lucky that I haven't had too many crises in my life, but I've had a few. Now, I don't know what I'd have done had I not been a Buddhist and done meditation, but I do know that my inner work certainly made a difference. I prepared for the crisis before it came. Okay. One last question before.
Hi.
Okay, so you already asked one, so I'll just see if there's one other person. We can't fit every. In fact, how much time have we got left? 11:30. And what's the time now? It's 11. Oh, okay. Okay, you're not bored, are you? I am. Yeah.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, I own dogs, yeah, and dogs, pets.
You own dogs?
Yeah, all my life. And in the past, when my dogs fell sick, very, very sick, and no hope of getting better, yeah, and without any qualms, I'll put them to sleep. Okay, as I learn more, the first precept is to refrain from killing. I'm getting more and more conflicted. Yeah, because I just put one down a few months ago, and I've got two now with me. I told myself I shouldn't be getting any more because then I'm creating attachments.
Of course,
but
yeah.
I can't resist because I think I'm giving them a home. Yeah, adopting. Yeah, so, and I know normally we will outlive the dogs. Okay, they normally have a lifespan of 12, 15 years. Yeah, and likelihood is I'll outlive them, hopefully. Yeah, and when they fall sick again, is euthanasia a very un-Buddhist thing?
Yeah. Okay, that's a good practical situation that people have to confront sometimes. Okay. Now, I know that dogs can be just wonderful friends. Sometimes they're better than humans. Okay. They're loyal. You can kick them, but they'll come back. They want to be your. They want you to love them again. Okay. They are really sometimes better than human beings. So it's only clear that people look to animals such as dogs and as companions. Incidentally, I was brought up with goats. Goats are the same. They are really wonderful companions. They love you. They wag their tail when you come. If you disappear for a few weeks and you come back, oh my God, they're so glad to see you. They are lovely, lovely animals. So I've never had an experience with dogs, except in Korean restaurants, but that's another thing. Okay. Okay, so you've given us a practical and common problem. I'm a Buddhist. I've taken a commitment to live by Buddhist principles. One of them is Panatipata, don't harm or kill living beings. So in a case like this, and this would be different from humans, but nonetheless there are exceptions. Okay? So somebody's going to threaten your life or the life of your family. I think you've got to do what you can to prevent that from happening. And I think it's perfectly right to do so. So in your case, you assess what's best for the dog. What's best for the dog? Not what's best for you, so that you don't feel pain at his death and his suffering, but what's best for the dog. And I think if anybody's sensible and a decent person, they'll do that. And I think there'll be some cases where the kindest thing to do is to euthanize them. That's it. And I don't think you need to feel guilty or bad about it. Now, in my country now, they're having something of a debate about should we allow people to kill themselves. And people have been very critical of me for saying this, but I think if you're in great pain and you've only got a few months left to go, and you are mentally clear, and you say, I want to opt out now, I think you should have a right to do it. I wouldn't do it. That is, I'm not going to do it for you. But if there is a doctor or a physician who gives you the tools, I think you should be able to do it. I don't think the government, I think the government's perhaps got too much influence in our lives. At least my own life should be my decision. Now that people sometimes kill themselves for other reasons which I think are definitely wrong. They're very depressed or something like that. I think that don't rush into it, because death is forever. But we had a president in our Buddhist society in Singapore. He was a very nice guy. He was a teacher. He loved teaching. He retired, and then he spent nearly 15 years doing tuition for children, free. He loved teaching. He was a really lovely guy. And one day he invited me and the new president to his house, and on his table he had all his books and everything, and he explained to me that he had cancer of the liver, he didn't have long to live, he wanted to note these books to the society, and we have a long talk about it and that. And then over the next few months I visited him a few times in hospital, and I have to say I was absolutely horrified. He was in terrible pain. The smell, despite the fact that they're keeping the bed clean and the sheets are clean, the smell of death it's not pretty. And he was this almost bright yellow because of the liver. And the second last time I visited him, he told me that he had signed, in Singapore you can sign a thing saying, you know, if I'm critically ill, don't artificially keep me alive. The problem is, in Singapore, is that can be overrid by a member of your family. So despite the fact that you've given them permission, if your son or your daughter says no, then they won't do it. So his son was a doctor. His doctor, oh, I can't say anything. He's not my father, I'm not the son, I can't say anything. But I was horrified. He signed this thing, knowing what he was doing clearly, etc. Anyway, he told me, so the second last time I visited him, his hands were tied to the bed. I said, why is that? I keep on pulling the tube out so that I will die. So now the doctors have tied my arms to the bed so I can't do that anymore. I said, no. And the last time I saw him was a matter of just 2 days before he died, and he was like this. He was in such pain, in such agony, and so exhausted that he couldn't even close his mouth, you know, like that. It affected me very badly, and I thought it was, I don't know what his son was thinking. I'm sure he was thinking what was best for his father, but I just thought that that was profoundly wrong. So my feelings, and here not speaking as a Buddhist, I'm speaking just as a decent human being, is if you've got to that stage and you feel that that's best for you, or you feel genuinely that you've thought about it carefully and it's best for your dog, I say do it. Okay?
Is the issue about attachment within it?
Okay. Well, that's a part of it, but there's many things come into it. And not all attachments are wrong all the time either. Anybody else? Okay, yes. Okay.
Thanks for seconds. Just to add on to the question that was asked earlier about, I think the term was used, good passing, is it? If you do well over time, you think well, and as a Buddhist, your next life would be...
Okay, right.
Yeah. But question is, if I've come in late in my journey to find Buddhism, right? Example, so maybe if I come in a month before, something happens to me, but my whole life I've been doing not so good things.
Okay.
Yeah, then what happens then?
Okay. So perhaps the question should be, can we modify our karma? And the answer is pretty clear in Buddhism, yes, you can. Now, there's a verse in the Dhammapada where it says, not in the mountains and not in the sea can you escape your karma. Well, we have to look at that within its context, because there are other places where the Buddha says, for example, he uses the analogy of water and salt. So basically he says, if you throw a handful of salt in a bucket, the water, it tastes very salty. If you throw a handful of salt in a lake, you can't taste it. And then he said, if a person's personality is basically good, one or two bad deeds is not going to make much difference. Obversely, if you're basically an awful person and you do one or two good deeds, it's not really going to make much difference. In other words, karma is about the sum total of our life, not every individual thing. So it often happens that people look back on their life and they realize that they did something really awful once, or maybe more than once, and now years later they're looking at it and they feel deeply ashamed or deeply sorry for what they did. I think probably many people, they'll have that experience. And I think it's good to feel bad about it. You're a rotten thing, you did a rotten thing. Is there any way that you can make up for it? So I'll give you an example. Once a woman has come to me, we're talking about Western women, and they've told me, I got a problem. I said, what's the problem? When I was 19, I had an abortion. And in those days, we believe, women has got a right to her body and rah, rah, and etc. But now that I'm 40, I really regret it. I keep on thinking, if I hadn't aborted that child, what would he or she be doing now? And thinking about this all the time and feeling really bad about it. Now, it's not my job to make somebody feel worse. This person has... in their youth, they did something that they didn't think was important in those days. And now, years later, they feel bad about it. So this is what I said to her. Well, first of all, how long have you been feeling bad about this? And she said, at least 3 or 4 years. And she told me that even her daughter had decided to have an abortion, and she tried to do everything she could to discourage her from doing it. But her daughter did end up having an abortion. But anyway, I said, how long have you been feeling uncomfortable about that? She said, at least 3 or 4 years, a bit longer. And I said, well, that negative feeling you're having, that's partly a result of your karma. Negative action, negative result. So some of her karma is being, used up by her feeling bad about herself. And I said, look, how about you do this? Why don't you do this? find some sort of child minding centre, or maybe, I don't know, an orphanage, and offer to work there as a volunteer, or make, over a period of a year or two, adopt a child and provide for the child's upbringing, food and etc. You know, you can get these overseas aid things where you adopt a child and you pay for his education. Why don't you do that? Oh, I never thought of that. I said, well, that won't bring your child back, but it will be a way of you making up for what you did in your foolish youth. Don't sit there and feel bad. Think about a way that you could make up for that. Now, and she was one of those people who came to me several years later, quite a surprise to me, and she told me she'd done that. And she felt that, and now she's got really interested in childhood issues, and she's sort of helping out a lot. It's given her life some sort of meaning and what have you. So I was extremely happy about that. So if you feel that you've done something wrong, you could, inevitably there's some way you can make up for it. And if it's a person that you have offended or helped or done something wrong to them, go and say sorry. Not easy. They may not even accept it. But generally speaking, if you're sincere, they might accept it. But even if they don't, you've done the right thing. I'll tell you a very interesting... Do you want one of my stories, interesting stories? I was talking about this to a monk I know, and we were talking about our childhood. When you get to 71, you're talking about your past all the time. It's awful, terrible. Anyway, we were talking about our teachers. And I had a teacher who was... He did great damage to me. He was a very bad teacher. I was not good at mathematics. He was our mathematics teacher. And I'm not joking. His name was Mr. Beasting. That was his name. We used to call him the Beast. And even the worst boys in the class never misbehaved in his class. He was a very nasty person. And my sister was in the next class, and she was very good at mathematics. So he was always comparing, your sister didn't do that, blah, blah, blah. What is wrong with you? And I think for 3 years, I learnt no mathematics. I was so frightened of this guy. And he was physically violent. In those days, they used to whack you. And for quite a few years, I thought to myself, if I ever found out where he was living, I would go and see him, knock on his door, and tell him that he had destroyed any love of mathematics in me, and to this day I'm not good at even adding up. In the 3 years that he taught me, I never learnt a thing from him. He was an awful teacher, and I'd tell him that. You're a total failure as a teacher. I never did that. Anyway, I mentioned this to my friend, and he told me something. Some years previously, he'd been thinking about when he was a kid, and he had a teacher who was a really good teacher and had given special attention to him. I said, oh, that's really nice. And then he said, and you know what I did? I looked up in the Melbourne telephone book, and I found his address, and I went to him. He didn't recognise me, he didn't remember me. But he remembered the school, he remembered the class and everything, and he invited him in, and they had a talk, and he said, oh, and so why have you come? He said, I just wanted to thank you for being such a good teacher. So, what's that got to do with what we were talking about? Nothing, actually, but it's a good story. Okay, so one thing is, I think it can be a very wholesome thing at least to think about the people that you may have offended or hurt as you've gone through your journey through life. And if you feel that you did them ill in some way, make up for it by going and saying sorry. Now, sometimes that's not appropriate, but I think sometimes it is. And the obverse is somebody's helped you. Somebody's gone out of their way to help you sometime in your life. Hey, look them up and tell them thanks. Good for you, good for them. Okay. Yeah.
If I may, thank you. If I may just continue what you say,
Yep.
Is that some form of, is that Buddhist repentance, making amendments, or is that in general? Because...
11:15, we've got 15 minutes, yeah. Okay. So is that...
My question is on Buddhist repentance.
Yeah.
We always say that, we live in the now and present. So we should forgive and forget the past. But the question is, if the one who has been wrong has been done to you, should you just say, it's okay, it's all in the past, live in the now. And what more if the person is the one who has been doing all the wrongs, and the person tells you, oh, it's all in the past, we just live in the now. So is there anything such as a Buddhist repentance? I don't know, or any kind of repentance in the Buddhist, in the Dharma. Thank you.
One thing we were talking about was repentance, or making amends, if you like. So I don't know anywhere actually where the Buddha says that it's a good thing to do. I can't think of anything in that. But I think it is a good thing to do. But if you feel it's all in the past, it's all finished, then don't bother. But as an exercise in self-understanding, and particularly if you're feeling bad about something that you might have done to somebody, that can be one way of healing that. I think it's a courageous thing to do anyway. I'll tell you another story. I was staying in Australia for a very short time in a particularly Buddhist society, and a woman came to see me. She was an Israeli. And she told me that her husband was doing some engineering work in Australia, so she'd come with him, and she was just interested in Buddhism. So we had a long talk. She was a very pleasant person. She came 3 other times. The 3rd time she came, she bought this absolutely delicious cake and gave it to me. So naturally enough, I always remembered her after that. Never heard from her again. Then years later, I'm in Singapore, and I get a letter, and it's got an Israeli stamp on it. I thought, who? I don't know anybody in... But the thing was, it was addressed to my Sri Lanka address, because I told her I'm only in Australia for a few weeks. There's my address in... It had gone to Sri Lanka, it was crossed out. It had gone to Melbourne, it was crossed out, and it had the Singapore address on it. Oh, me tova, this letter has really got around, and it's got to me. I was really surprised. Who the hell is this? So I opened it, and she reminded me who she was. And as soon as she said the cake, I remembered who that was. And basically, she just told me that she has just taken the 3 refuges in a Buddhist group somewhere in Israel. And she remembered that the first step in that was talking to me. And she just wrote me a letter to thank me. I kept that letter for years. What a nice thing to do. It can make a difference. It can make people sort of tear up a little bit. It was a really nice thing to do. Do a nice thing to people sometimes. Anything else? Okay. You again. Oh. Yeah.
Bhante, just wanted to know, since you have been a monk for 40 over years, Buddhism is going through a lot of challenges in a lot of countries now. It is. And looks like Christianity seems to has a lot of influence on the younger generation. What are your thoughts, and what do you think should be done actually?
Yeah. Well, I've got some pretty strong feelings about this. I think it's, for the most part, it's our own fault. I think our monks are very inactive. They spend too much time doing chanting ceremonies and blessing ceremonies, and not enough time teaching people good, solid Dhamma. I think the lay community is often encouraged to be passive. I think a lot of monks encourage people, look, just keep your mouth shut and give lots of dana. And so when they are challenged, they don't know how to handle it. I think the strong points of Christianity is they're very, very well organized. They've got all sorts of social service things, far, far beyond anything that most Buddhists have got. And so people are guided into Christianity by being helped, counseling services, all sorts of things. But my view is there's a type of beer called Heineken. Oh, you've drunk it, have you? Okay, I'll speak to you later. Okay. Now, I saw an advertisement they had quite a few years ago, but I thought it was a really good advertisement. It's a blank page, and there's just a small bottle of Heineken beer on it. And it says, when you make a good beer, you don't have to make a big fuss. And I thought, wow, that's pretty good. Most beer ads, you know, there's this beautiful girl and this young, handsome young guy, and they're drinking beer, and this is just, when you make a good beer, you don't have to make a big fuss. Now, if you want to move forward with business comparisons, Christianity has got a lousy product, but it's got very good business, very good NCOs, very good sales, marketing, all that sort of thing. Buddhism's got a great product, but boy, its salesmen are just lousy. So places like here would be the beginning of some change. That is, looking at managerial and realistic ways of promoting Buddhism. I think that my place in Singapore has had a small role to play in these changes also. I always emphasize, our motto in Singapore is, know the Dhamma thoroughly, practice it fully, share it generously with others. So the role of the monk or the lay teacher should be to transmit to you good, solid, practical Dhamma. Your role should be to do your best to sincerely practice it. Okay? And the role of both the lay community and the Sangha is to tell other people. I noticed that, at least in Singapore, Buddhists, even when they know it well, they're sort of timid to tell it, or even sometimes ashamed. And I think that's a terrible tragedy. Now, I'd hate it if Buddhists went around knocking on people's doors, and that's not necessary. But what you know, to share with others and encourage them to explore Buddhism. I think that this would make a big difference. The second thing is, I think religions like Christianity, it's the numbers game. We've got more than you've got. You want those people? That's okay. So I don't think Buddhists should be concerned about the numbers. But when they see that the numbers are going down rapidly, which is what's happening in Singapore, every 10 years when they have the census, you can see the number of Christians have grown and the number of Buddhists have dropped, which is it's a tragedy. Okay, so I think there's some of the things that are needed. We need a better quality of monk. Unfortunately, we've got some pretty good ones, and you've got 2 or 3 quite good ones here in Malaysia. Hopefully, more come up. But we mustn't rely on monks alone. There is no reason why good Dhamma cannot be learnt from a good lay teacher. Okay? So we should get used to hearing the Dhamma from anybody who knows it well, whether they're wearing this or a pair of blue jeans. That's what I think. Last question. Or did you ask me? Didn't you have a second question you wanted to ask? Oh, you did? See how bad my memory is? Okay, one last... Oh, here we go. Yeah, go on. We'll make this the last question, okay?
Bhante, in connection with that brother's question, right?
Last question.
Yeah. The reason is, I noticed they have read our Buddhism suttas and everything, and they have found the ways to criticize. So there is one question which I get often.
So they have found the...
They as in the other religions,
okay.
to criticize to criticize us lah, about the bad and all. So one question I get often is, Siddhartha left his family in pursuit of the spiritual path. So parents out there are saying that it's very irresponsible as a father. So how... And this has gone to schools also. Right. Other Christian kids have pointed this out to my kid. I have not found a good answer. Can you
give you quite a few.
Can you help me? Thank you.
Now, if a Christian tells me that, and some have, well, let's quote Jesus. Unless you hate your father and hate your mother and hate your sister and your brother, you cannot be my disciple. It's in the Bible. Yep. Once Jesus was teaching and somebody said, oh, your mother and your brother are here. They are not my mother and brother. They are not my family. You, my disciples, are my family. Oh, really? Okay. There's quite a few like that in the Bible. If you like, you can get a copy of my book. It's online, where I give the quotations, where you can read this thing. Unless you hate, and the word is misia. The Greek word is misia, which means loathe, revolt, hate. Not my words, it's in the Bible. Now, I have found that when you quote that, and normally I don't think it's polite to do that, but when they say something like that, well, I've got a good answer for that. According to you, according to the Bible, Jesus said you must hate your mother and father. Not give them up, hate them. It's in there. Okay? So when I've done that, most Christians, it's not, give us your Bible, there it is, there. They don't know what to say. So that's one thing. Second thing is, throughout history, there have been great men and women who have been prepared to give up everything for a higher goal, for a higher ideal. Okay? And we usually praise them for that. Okay? So I think the Buddha renounced the world, where he says so, for the welfare of the many, out of happiness for the world, out of concern and compassion for everybody. So he had a higher ideal. Okay? Normally, I can't right now think of famous people in history who have done that, but there have been plenty. What about somebody like the Pope? He gave up his family. What about all those priests? They gave up their families. Why? For a higher ideal. The Buddha was only one of many who did that. So I think that is a complete... This is what you call polemics. It's not that some people read through Buddhism to understand it. They read through it to try to find holes so they can come and see me. Have a debate with me. I know the Bible pretty well. They'll be running off with their tail between their legs very quickly. So if you go onto the internet, you can find my book. It's called Jesus and the Buddha. a study in their commonalities and contrasts. Now I look at every aspect of Jesus' life, every aspect of the Buddha's life, and compare it. Then I look at their doctrines. And I admire Jesus. I think in some senses he was a very exceptional, he was a very exceptional person. And I've said that. But there are other things he said that I think are really rather silly. So, but the thing about the book is every single reference to the Bible and the Tipitaka is in there, so you can read them. So if you go to the section on family life, have a look at that. And just one other thing. Christian family values. Well, that's good. I think family values are important. But Christian family values? Let's see what Jesus said about the family, okay? It's in my book. Jesus said only one thing about marriage. There are 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke and John. Now I'm not talking about the epistles, St. Peter and those people, what they wrote. I'm just looking at what Jesus said. Jesus said only one thing about marriage and marriage life and marriage relationships. You can only divorce your wife if she commits adultery. That is the only thing that Jesus ever said about marriage. Now, if you look at what he said the Buddha had to say about married life, wow, there's an awful lot in there. And some of it is very beautiful. So if you can compare the two, well, it's an interesting difference. Read my book. Okay, we'll leave it at that. And thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for your... Every one of those questions was, I think it was a good question. We had a good session, yeah? So I'd like to finish my side of it by just... I like to chant the first 2 verses from the Dhammapada because to me they sum up what Buddhism is about. Mano Pubangama Dhamma. Everything begins with the mind. You purify your mind and use it right and things will get better. You don't do that and things become complicated. That's basically what it says. Okay? Mano Pubangama Dhamma Mano Seta Mano Maya Manasache Padutena Basati Va Karoti Va Tatunang Dukaman Veti Chankang Vahawatu Padang Manu Pumbangama Dhamma Manu Seta Manu Maya Manasate Pasanena Basati Vaha Karoti Va Tatonang Sukaman Veti Chaya Anapayani Tatonang Sukaman Veti Chaya Varanapayani Tatunang Sukaman Veti Chaya Varanapayani